Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Beyond Max Q. I'm Mollie Jahner. I am excited. I'm usually excited, but I'm excited today to invite Dean Rudolph to the show. He has quite the career. Volunteer firefighter, 25 plus years in the aviation industry. He's also been a founder. He's grown businesses. I think he'll tell you he's also had some failures, but then recovered in amazing ways, which I think is a good thing. We could talk about that all day long. And, but he's also so tenured and has so much wisdom from his military service and all of the really cool certification opportunities that he's worked really hard for. So with that, Dean, I would love for you to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're doing right now and all the cool things you do.
Well, I thank you, Molly. Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the kind introduction. As I joke with my wife, we are now, I shouldn't say about her, but I'm the old guy that knows stuff. So the longer you stay in something and the more that you do of it, the more you seem to know and accumulate. But I'm currently an airworthiness and certification subject matter expert, working with the Collinear Group in Seattle and other organizations. I am an FAA DAR for manufacturing, which puts me at the nexus of new technologies and development and conformity and compliance and safety. And I am deepening my relationships at the FAA at all levels to try to ensure that I'm current on policy, but also potentially able to lend my experience and my expertise to crafting policy and driving interpretations in the innovation that is happening at such a breakneck speed in aviation today.
Well, and you're one of three people can you
Now,
talk about
currently,
that?
I am one of three DARs in the world on the manufacturing side that have full airworthiness authority for UAS and OPA. So that's think drones and optionally piloted aircraft. And there's so much movement in that space, and that is a rapidly evolving landscape as well.
So what does that look like being one of three? Is there just like a waiting list, outside your door, like to get your eyes on things? What can you talk about that a little bit?
So I would hope that would have been the case, but that's not necessarily where it is yet. That's not really how this works. But I haven't also pushed that out yet because I'm trying to define how that interface works with the FAA. Being one of three with all of those delegations means that there's not a lot of well-traveled roads to visit there. Uh, Really what it means for me right now is that I was one of a few people who had the fortunate experience to gain direct and applicable experience and knowledge in the application of airworthiness against these types of vehicles. And you have to get those certifications, you have to do that for a certain period of time that the FAA defines. They actually had to scale back their period of time based on how new and novel this end of the industry is. So fortunately, I had that experience, sat for a panel, and got those certs. Now it's in the deployment of those certifications in support of industry, right? So finding people who are struggling, uh, having conversations about how they can unblock some of the certification pieces and the roadblocks that they've run into. And the line's not there yet, but I'm eagerly awaiting its formation.
Well, and you've also founded businesses and you've grown businesses. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, you said it earlier. I could talk all day about that. It's a pretty varied thing. I've founded and floundered businesses. So, the startup journey is a hard one. It's exciting and but super challenging. I've started certification businesses that had manufacturing components. Had to get all of the FAA certifications for all of the operations as well. So, writing manuals, performing audits, doing all of the necessary behind the scenes activities to make sure the feds can come in and stamp things off easily and quickly. But more importantly, what I've found through the founding, and I've hired family, I've hired friends, is that it's the makeup of the team that you bring in that is critical to the success of the business. You can have the greatest idea, you can have the greatest service model, but if you don't have the right people and the right team and the right alignment, it goes nowhere. And part of my failing in an earlier business was exactly that. I expanded the team quicker than my ability to selectively manage that and select the right and appropriate personnel, and that cost me the business ultimately.
That's really interesting. Well, and I remember one time you were talking because I've known Dean for a bit, which is really nice, and so I know a little bit more about him, so I'm able to kind of ask some more questions in that sense. But you mentioned something about how you love to protect your team, which I think is really interesting because, volunteer firefighter, military service, like there's obviously an element of like service and protection, that's a part of your, your integrity, those types of things. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, what that looks like as a founder.
Yeah, husband and dad as well, right? So protection is kind of baked into all of
True.
those roles. I appreciate the compliment because it's something I take great pride in. Um, I look at the team is an extension of you if it's done correctly, right? And so you're all working towards the same goal, but you're at different levels of the stratosphere necessarily. And so in the military, the terminology is providing top cover, right? So the people that are down doing the dirty operations, they need top cover to ensure that they have the freedom to maneuver and operate. And top cover to me is a critical component because it is really the protection of those people, right? So it's funny because in my career, everyone thinks the higher you get, the less crow you eat and the less problems that you deal with. And I'm like, that's the exact opposite of my experience. So the higher I've gotten, the more I've apologized and the more crow that I've eaten and the more hits that I've taken. But all of that is not important. What's important is the protection of the team, as you mentioned, and keeping them safe, secure, and confident and comfortable in what they're doing. So in certification, it's a very high stress and detail oriented environment. And I had a young engineer that was trying to present for his first time to an international audience, and uh, it was the Korean regulators, a Korean airline, and they're pretty notoriously direct and uptight around how they expect things to be communicated and done. And he was really struggling, and he was struggling to get his feet under him. He was struggling to get his words together and present the technical content that was required to meet the need of the meeting. And he was getting a lot of pressure, and that was ratcheting up. And I just basically paused the entire meeting, uh, put everything on hold, counseled him for a couple of minutes, talked him off the ledge, and then re-engaged the team, reset the table, let everyone know that we had had some technical difficulties. That was the reason for some of the gaps, etc. And just basically watched him deflate from the pressure and be able to re-engage effectively and deploy all the knowledge that he had, but was unable to access under the stress of the moment.
Right. Well, and you probably made him feel like he also had someone had his back, which I think is so important. And like no amount of failure is going to, because ultimately everyone thinks about like job loss, right? Like as a team member. And so like that's like the worst case scenario. Like, okay, I'm done. Like I'm embarrassed. This is the end. But if you remove that, then people can really flourish. They can operate and do what they need to do. It's kind of what that sounds like.
That is correct. And, I pride myself on a sense of humor as well, so I tend to diffuse that stress with
Good.
humor also. And so, humor can humanize situations like that. And so we had a quick joke, and he started laughing, and that changed the entire nature of his, psychological wiring at the moment. So yeah, it took away the immediate concern. I'm not sure if he had even could see far enough to have job safety
I'm
considerations at
sure.
the
Yeah,
moment.
just
I think he was just trying to breathe.
stress. Like, oh my gosh. No, totally. I mean, we've all been there. I
I
mean, how
have
many
been
times
there.
have been on stage and like, all of a sudden it's like frozen or like you're sweating and it's just really stressful. I don't think you need to be extroverted or introverted to still be stressed on stage. I think people get nervous every time regardless,
It's
but
human.
I would also love for you because I know you've done this quite a bit in your career. You know, what does it look like to stay consistent? What does it look like to have grit, and determination as you build something. Because I think, especially with certification, it's a long play. There's often, like it's aerospace in general, sales cycles and, products and things take a little longer. And I think that that would be a really interesting, like anything that you build, any kind of company, there's going to be that like grit that you have to have as you build it, that waiting, that patience. And I would love for you to talk about how you make it through those things because that's hard.
Whew, that is a tough one. The reality is, it is a requirement. So you mentioned certification being the long play, aerospace being the long play. In the AAM space, one of the things that I've struggled with, and it was recently highlighted in a Aviation Week and Space Technology article about trying to stop iterating and start certifying. And so that is a real struggle that they have. But uh, the general tone of grit and consistency and constancy, it really comes from focus. And what I mean by that is if you're focused in on a day-to-day basis on the things that need to be done to further the mission, then longer term, all of that consistency shows up because you've executed according to the plan. Plans change, plans get modified, plans get blown up, frankly. But at least you have something to deviate from. I find a lot of times the people that are most inconsistent are the ones with the greatest, broadest ideas, but the least tactical, practical execution strategies. And that's a difficult thing to bridge. And usually you find in the founder space someone who's got those great ideas, and the ones that are most successful are someone who pairs up with someone who is tactically oriented and has all of the the controls and processes and other things that are required to day in and day out turn an idea into a reality.
I love that. I actually we're building our house out here in Montana and for the audience. And I always talk about how if my husband wasn't the realist, I don't think we'd actually have a house because I'm totally the dreamer and I would be untethered floating somewhere in a tree house. There would be no like actual physical house. And I think that's really funny, like that dynamic. I think you need it all throughout your life in all every different place. So that's a really good perspective. I like that. For the sake of time, I do want to dive into okay, we have a group of people growing, scaling businesses. What tips or tricks do you have or wisdom that you feel like you haven't already mentioned that you think we should impart to them today?
Wow, there's really no tricks to it, right? So you just talked about grit and consistency. So
Yeah.
I think the thing that I would share that I struggled with earlier in my career, and when I finally was able to lock into some of it, really made a difference is have the belief in yourself and in your idea and in your team and what you're trying to do. So you almost have to make that unshakable. That doesn't mean that you're not open to input and revision and strategic redirects, but you have to have the confidence and the constancy to be a North Star for your product, for your people, for the market necessarily. And so really it's finding the however you need to do to recharge that and rebuild that muscle as it gets overused. You really just have to do that.
I like that. I love the North Star thought, right? Like that's really good. I like
Well,
that.
where's it come from? I mean, if everyone, there's the old adages, if everyone's just rowing but we're not rowing the same direction, where's the boat going? So
Probably sinking
right,
into the water.
right. Or circles, and
Capsized.
that's not getting anyone anywhere.
Oh my gosh, then you're gonna have to rescue everybody because Dean's the only one
Right,
that knows how to swim.
right.
No, this is fantastic. I love this. I always end with what are you currently reading? I'd be interested to see what you are currently reading.
So this is going to sound funny when we tie it back to the constancy and consistent, but I am rereading Atomic Habits uh, because I have struggled with that. I'm also reading a great book by Peter Pigot out of Canada about the origin of fire bombers and how those came to be, and that is a really interesting thing. It's a confluence of my passions of aerospace and firefighting. So it's an awesome book.
That's fantastic. And I do want to end too with if people want to reach out to you, if they want to contact you, what does that look like? And how are you helping startups, right? 'Cause I don't think we touched on that. And I want to make sure we circle back to it. Like how are you helping people if they have a need, what would that look like for them to reach out to you?
Well, so first and foremost, I'm available on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me there. Dean at acceleratize.com is a quick and easy email address as well. And the way that we're helping people is the same conversation that you and I just had around ideas, around execution. Uh, that's the start of any path to helping, right? Trying to make a discovery of what's needed, what's currently working, what's not working, where the gaps are. I could go on all day about the specifics of certification and helping with this document or that document, but that's not really of real interest to most people unless they have a specific need for it. The the main focus and thrust of the help is refining approaches to ensure market adoption and business viability.
I feel like you're the realist. right? Like I feel like there's a lot of dreamers out there. They have their like startups, their founders, they have these really great ideas, these businesses across all kinds of walks of life. And you have been there, done that. And you can kind of look at the plan and you can say, okay, here's where we need to be, do the nuts and bolts of these things. Kind of like what we talked about earlier. Like you're the person who helps make it a reality, which I think is needed. And if they haven't found that person in their life yet, you can be that person.
I appreciate the compliment. I will say that it's a fine balance to be a realist, but not a dream killer. And,
Yeah,
you
that's a
know,
good point.
so yeah, I work really hard to not be a dream killer because it takes a lot of passion and a lot of courage to have a dream. It doesn't take much to shoot them down. I love the poem "The Man in the Arena," right? And so there's a part of that that I try to honor all the time in these engagements, which is, you've got the passion, you've got the vision. So what do you need to help make that real? And without shooting that down.
I love that. Well said. Well, with that, I will close out. If you want to connect with Dean, please do that. He's a tremendous person. Truly, I really do feel honored to be able to know you. And so I hope that everybody in the community reaches out and gets to know you too. And as we close out, as always, all the links will be in the video description. You guys can reach out and see those things there. And I hope that you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Molly. It's an honor to know you as well.